Now we have a bonus session on leadership and coaching techniques. The story from above with the kitten is an example of leadership through inspiration, but there's different styles of leadership, and there's a lot of people who teach leadership and a lot of people who can do this better than me. I'll just give you a little bit of an introduction if you've never heard it before in a corporation because you worked there or in another context. So there's different kinds of leadership. The best example of everything is not control, like is in a lot of old style corporations, but it's servant leadership. Servant leadership doesn't focus on yourself as the leader, that you have the power to get people to do what you want. Although hopefully you get them to do what you want, but you do it to help others, to serve a greater cause, because you care for those around you, you care for those that work for you, that you care for those that are in the same boat with you. And that is why you want to lead and you want to improve the situation. So it's not about you. There's a variety of leadership styles, of course. There's a lot of coaching courses out there. Some are more directive, some are less directive, some are more coaching style, some are more leadership style, that you are from a little bit of a higher level than a coach is on the same level. A leader is on a bit of a higher level and leads people through. And depending on situations, different coaching styles and different leadership styles are important. So I can't give you, in the space of this, a space of a bonus to an additional course, a whole course on leadership. But what I can teach you a little bit is how to manage cultures through change process, because if you want to change your environment around you, you have to be a leader. If you want to make it better for your animals, for yourself, and for animals out there, you have to be a leader. And that also means that sometimes things have to change because they aren't like they should be right now. And there are certain things that you will find that will happen in change situations. So this is where I want to show you a little bit what I have learned, because I worked in corporations for a long time in change at a very high level. Sometimes I worked in a normal department, but then had to change myself and had to change my department and the way things were done at the time. Otherwise, I would have lost my job because it was impossible to keep on working the way we did at the time. Sometimes I worked in actual change departments that were supposed to change the entire company, right? And there are always the same things that come up, and it is quite funny to see them. And especially in some cultures, people are very aware of it, like in America, for example, or sometimes in England even as well. In other cultures, like where I am right now, people really aren't aware that these things are happening, and they're acting in a very unaware way, but I can actually see, okay, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this, and I can see it in myself, and that is the most important thing. Because when I know that another change is coming up, and a lot of changes are coming up in future, which I want to be changes that are not negative towards those I care for, but are positive, and I find win-win situations, for example, then I know certain things will come up in me as well, and then I can deal with them. One thing is that change creates uncertainty, and uncertainty oftentimes creates fear. We know that people suddenly have to do things differently. They don't really know how they should be doing them, and that, and they don't want to have the extra effort to figure it out. How do you deal with fear? What do you need to be ready for in fear with others? Well, there's a traditional method, and this is the traditional method on the screen. Now, the way people deal with change is a lot of times the same way people deal with grief. And there are 4 stages of grief that we know about, or 5 stages. Well, one is denial, and this would be the first stage, right? If you take a look at this, that's the first stage. What is the consequence of that? Well, you stay stuck in denial and you face the consequences. And the consequences may be that your competition is going to kill you. It may be a regulator comes around and knocks at your door and says, nope, that is not what you should be doing. It could be another department that gets all the funding that you should have been getting. It could be an ambitious coworker is taking over what you should be doing. It could be, as is important for us, that global warming and the climate change is suddenly coming around knocking at your door because you didn't pay attention for the last 30 years, right? Or it could be that you have destroyed the animals that you didn't think were very important and they could have saved your life. Or it could be that you poisoned the ocean and, then the ocean poisoned you right back with mercury or whatever else is out there. Or you blew stuff into the air and that is poisoning your children now. Right? So denial, that doesn't mean that the problem is going away. If there's a tsunami coming, if there's a big wave coming, and you stick your head in the sand, you will still be blown against those rocks, right? And you will try to breathe without air and there won't be anything. So why not? Well, let's get to that later, how we can deal with that. So this is the first way that people deal with it. This one is another way. It's another traditional method. Right? Also something that is very, very popular, something that actually I do a lot of times if I don't want to have that confrontation. And that is why the Gurkha method was so difficult for me to learn, because that is the exact opposite of what I would like to do. And of course, sometimes there's nowhere to run. And that is that consequence. And we are still here. Right? Now, behaviors to look out for that indicate denial. It's trying to prove that change is unreal or unnecessary. You can have that in corporations. You can have that in your neighborhood. Sometimes characterized by bursts of additional defensive energy. Sometimes it's simply disengagement, that people just, don't do anything anymore and just sit around and chat and have a coffee and just pretend that nothing's happening. Behaviors to look out for that indicate flight mode. In companies, that is a lot of times indicators that high performers are looking for other jobs because they are afraid that their job is going to go away. So they rather go somewhere else before that happens, so that it doesn't affect their career. Withdrawal, especially seen in introverts, that they're suddenly not interested anymore. Or a flurry of activity in the current job because they're just trying to forget about, what is coming. Unnecessary mistakes and unexplained emotional behavior or sudden focus on extracurricular activities. Sometimes find that in people as well who get upset about other people's animals. That they suddenly are very emotional and want to control everything that you're doing. And sometimes that is simply an expression of fear, right? But anyway, so this is what you to look out for. There's a different way also how you can deal with fear, and that is this. Yes. So this is anger on the change curve. Of course, there are interesting ways how this can express itself. Fear and the resulting anger can be turned into energy and into determination, but it is necessary to focus that energy on the right target. Besides, not the regulator or the boss or the change manager or each other or other departments, right? Now, behaviors to look out for that indicate anger, and that can be active or passive aggression. And in some countries, passive aggression is actually not known. In America, everybody knows what passive aggression is. In other countries, that is not actually seen as aggression. Active aggression, of course, is audible unhappiness. You hope nobody's going to actually get physical. Where I am right now, that's hopefully never going to happen. But in some countries, obviously, that can. But passive aggression can also be disengagement, lack of attendance at meetings. Even if you want to change something in the neighborhood, they just don't show up. Lack of participation if forced to attend. Managees don't get the chance to get input into change, and until it's too late. So they're just being told because the management is too afraid to actually have a discussion about things. Or it can be sabotage. In almost, I think there was an IBM study that showed that in most change projects, and it didn't even matter the size, I think, it was always about 17% of laggards. And those are the people who are actively sabotaging the change. and that can have different reasons, like they think they are going to lose power, but it can simply also be a resistance against change. People bring their own agendas to meetings and workshops and training sessions, for example. They try to break the systems and processes that the new systems and processes, or they spread negative rumors about the change to colleagues. And in the neighborhood, if you are with neighbors, for example, you have moved in with animals, for example, that can be that they spread the wrong rumors about you, like happened to me in Canada, for example, which were totally unbased. They always say, oh, well, if there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah, but the fire may have been set by them. It's not always. Martin Luther King, for example, was shot, and people say there's smoke. If there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah, but it wasn't his fault, right? Same thing with Mahatma Gandhi. The same thing with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was crucified. Think about that. Next time you think, no matter how thin you slice it and stuff. There are situations where people are still, it is their own stuff, and the smoke and the fire is in themselves, not in the situation and not in the people who are trying to improve things. And you have to be aware that this kind of thing can happen, and kind of think upfront how to deal with that, especially in the Gurkha strategy or in the leadership strategy, that you already have a response to that when it comes up, because a lot of things are, it's obvious what will come up, what people have said in the past, what their fears were. So you can do a little bit of education, for example, up front, which I did with the manager, because I knew, okay, I've got one cat, for example, now, right? And if she's this afraid, if there could be a conflict, for example. But once she had, the kitten herself and she loved it, there wasn't going to be a conflict anymore, because she had a stake in it herself. This thing, how to influence, is a lot of times used against people, but we can use it for people and for our animals, and everybody can benefit. A lot of these influencing techniques can be used in a very positive manner that helps really everyone, including the person influenced, right? So, but if you still are in anger, then you will probably still be here, right? So common causes for anger is, or the fear of and resistance for change, is loss of control over territory, excessive uncertainty during change sprung on people as a surprise, loss of faith for those associated with the current state, because somebody put the current state in place, right? And you want to change it because it's bad. It's their work that's suddenly bad. Concerns about competence. People have learning anxiety, think they can't learn the new thing. They don't know if there's a dog coming into their, around, what is it going to do if they have never learned how to deal with the dog properly? Or if there's a cat or something, it's not just that they think, what is she going to do? And, she's got all these claws and stuff. Of course they've got claws, but they're not going to use them if you are nice to them, right? Change is more work. A lot of times you may have to do a little bit there or there, but it's so worth it if it's, especially with animals, they bring so much joy into our lives. But if people have never felt that joy, they don't know, they just see the additional work. Ripple effects. Change interferes with the activities of other areas. That is in departments, for example, right? If you change a certain system in a department, then it will change other things down the line as well. That may sometimes be the case even in a neighborhood somewhere, but sometimes the changes are a good thing, right? Past resentment surface due to interruption of a steady state, or sometimes the threat is really in other contexts. Change is resisted because it can hurt, so they think it will hurt with animals and they don't see the benefit, right? So we are still here, but our task, if we are really good leaders, if we know something about change, is to focus people's energy that comes from fear during the project so it's directed towards the solution. And that is something that I learned in change management, but also in other areas in my life when I made personal changes in my life, and I've made so many because I had to. It is something that my skydiving instructor told me on, I think, the first day before we did the first jump. He said, okay, if you have the parachute open, if you want to then land on a field, even if it's a huge field, if there's one tree on it, do not look at the tree. Because if you look at the tree, then you will land in the tree. It doesn't matter how big that field is, you look at the tree, you land in the tree. And that is another theory as well that a lot of people out there use. There's apparently this road somewhere in America, and you can see it from space. Apparently there's these poles at the side of the road, and every once in a while somebody drives in one of these poles, and they may not survive. But then you take a look at all the skid marks, and 80% of the skid marks go towards the pole. I mean, there's huge gaps between the poles. Why don't they just go into the gap? But that's because people are so afraid to drive into the pole. They look at the pole, they look at the pole. I don't want to drive in the pole. I don't want to drive in the pole. I don't want to drive in the pole, and then they drive in the pole. Right? They would just have had to aim for the gap. So we want to aim for the gap, even if it is a tiny gap somewhere. And there's a tiny possibility that there's a win-win situation between humans and animals, humans and nature. People are finding these possibilities now. I have a lot of posts lately on LinkedIn for the last 3 or 4 years where people have found opportunities and made lots of money with these opportunities that are actually win-win situations that are winning, where they are winning and the animals are winning and people are winning, which is beautiful. But you have to focus on them. You have to find them. You have to look where they are. And with that campground, I didn't know there was going to be COVID. I didn't know that, people were going to be locked down with their children for 2 months. But when they came out, they were happy about Petra Park. That was the win-win situation. The campground made more money. The people had something to show their children because the zoos were closed, right? And they couldn't do anything else because everything else was also closed. And my family was safe. It was a win-win-win. That was not something that I could have imagined before, but it just came because, there was a focus on it. So this is how it can actually work. Methods to focus energy. That is something that is probably more towards change in companies. You use the right strategy for the right type of organization, type and culture. That's a little bit too much to go into. I think I've got a bonus in one of the other courses that explains this a little bit. Clear measurement of change effect, clear communication, what effect the change has, focus mostly on the benefits, not all the problems that are coming with the change, but the benefits of what's good, what's going to be cool afterwards, what good feelings we're going to have afterwards. Keep things moving in the right direction and keep focus forward, just constancy of aim and effort, like Master Co says. Spread best practice, give meaning to vision and strategy. Use influencing strategies that accordance to where individuals are on the change curve. You need a different strategy if somebody's in denial than if he's in anger, and something else in anger than if he's in depression, because the next focus underneath is depression before people go to acceptance and then start building a new life, right? Which is also happening in other types of changes. Use change agents as influencers. If you have people who are a really good example, for example, even if it's children, or if it's some girl or something who's really good with animals in the area, who can show you how to do this, you can use them. You can do educational workshops, training and support, for people, for staff in companies, or for the in charities, or for the people in the neighborhood. Involve staff or your neighbors in the change themselves. Don't just try to push it on them. Strengthening the driving forces, weakening resisting forces. There's so many different things. There's a whole business around change management. There's courses you can take. Right. So change fitness training. People generally need help during change process with information about the change, about benefits. There's a whole lot of other stuff. I think I'll put this, I have already put this PDF into your pack. You can read this there. The outcome is you don't have to know all of this to become an expert coach or change manager or world leader, but maybe you can use some of these things in projects around you, or changes you want to make to protect animals and nature that can work for you, that can work in your companies. If your company is in a kind of involved in something like ESG or, some of the new technologies. It can work if you are in a company that has nothing to do with that, but has like a charity project. And sometimes some companies pay their people for 1 or 2 days working in a charity, and you can use it there and you can make a difference there, or you can make a difference in your neighborhood. Maybe you're already an expert coach, a change manager, or world leader, and maybe this course is just giving you a few distinctions of what else you could also try, or what you already know and already do, but maybe unconsciously, and show other people that way how to do this. Okay, the action is explore where you would like to improve in the area of leadership and take some action to improve it. Every one of us, no matter where we are on the scale, if we are no leaders at all yet, and if you have children or pets, hopefully you're a little bit of a leader, or if we are master leaders already, every one of us has an area where we can improve. So find a book or join us on the Facebook group on Mondays, where we will introduce some tools, especially with regards to non-violent resistance. If you find a bully, for example, book a course. It doesn't have to be with us, because at this course, I've got one more course that deals with if you want to actually take action and change your job and change your career or change your mission, because you have realized through this course, or maybe even before already, that you don't want to hide anymore. You don't want to just do what you did before, but you're actually ready to take a more active stand, even in your job, to help along the change that is obviously coming at the moment, and that it could be really, really beneficial if we drive it in the right direction and if we direct the energy. And if you want to use your skills, your work skills, to go in that direction, I have a separate course for that. That could help, because I've made a lot of different changes in my life, in my jobs as well. And some of them, paid rather well, 6 figures. Some of them didn't that much. But it was always every change that I made, because initially I'm actually a lawyer by trade, but I worked in very different industries. I also worked in acting, for example. I worked with animals partly. So I've done different things. And I know how difficult it can be to work yourself into something, but I also have strategies to do it, and they have been very successful at times. So that is a course about that, how to work yourself into something new. But whatever you do in terms of leadership, book yourself in somewhere. It is always a good thing to book yourself in somewhere, maybe twice a year. That's also something that other people are recommending. Other techniques that may be helpful. NLP I found very helpful. And one of the best teachers is Tony Robbins. I have mentioned him several times before, because I do owe him a debt of gratitude, because he did get me out of the first stages. And I've a lot of the tips that I've gotten, I basically got through some of his seminars. And NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is one of the best techniques initially that I found to deal with some of the issues that I had within myself that were actually an obstacle to making the outer strategies work, that were so helpful later. Mindset, be a bit careful. There's lots of free videos out there, so take a look at that first and see what speaks to you and what is actually helpful and actually healing. Busting limiting beliefs, that's the work by Byron Katie, is one of the books that is also recommended. I've mentioned it before. I haven't actually I only know of it. I've actually haven't read the book, but I've heard so many people talk about it and talk about the strategy of how to bust limiting beliefs and turn them around, that it is something that you could take a look at. And events, there's all kinds of different personal development events, and they are not necessarily for us as people who love animals and want to come out and finally show the world, hey, this is something that is really beautiful and that we should be protecting. And that is not just something we want to protect somewhere in Africa, but around here as well. And where we don't just want to sort the trash, but actually make space for the animals that are around here. And those events are not necessarily for us, but they also, personal developments, they have so many good tools that we can also use. So I can really recommend those.